Your Niagara Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, December 21st. Your reader is Ron Bickelman. Let's take a look at the Western New York forecast. Breezy and colder today with low clouds, high 28. Cloudy tonight, low 22. Tomorrow, sun in areas of low clouds, snow, sleet, and freezing rain at night, 1 to 2 inches, high of 33. Tuesday, cloudy with a little rain, high 39. Wednesday, rather cloudy, high 36. Thursday, little rain in the afternoon, high 45, low 41. Friday, a few morning showers, high of 48, low of 35. And Saturday, occasional morning rain, high of 40, low of 33. Now let's take a look at the lead story in the Buffalo News. As flu cases surge, experts say season will be pretty severe. Mount Mercy Academy in South Buffalo had no school on December 10th. 2 days later, West Buffalo Charter School followed suit. These schools weren't closed for snow days. They both were closed for wellness days due to the high number of illnesses among staff and students at West Buffalo Charter. The emergency one-day closure gave the maintenance crew a chance to perform a deep cleaning of the building to prevent further spread of illness. We are in the thick of the respiratory illness season just days before the indoor holiday gatherings. COVID-19 and respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, are circulating, and other familiar viruses more responsible for surge illness. There's a boatload of flu out there right now as well, as best we can tell, said Dr. Thomas Russo, professor and chief of the Division of Infectious Diseases, University of Buffalo Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. State Health Commissioner declared influenza prevalent early this month. Flu cases and hospitalizations have continued rising ever since. For the week of December 13th, there were more than 47,500 lab-confirmed flu cases statewide, an 83% jump from the prior week. And influenza hospitalizations increased 61% in a week to about 2,250. New York City is seeing a big surge now, and cases are ticking up in Western New York. For the week, December 13th, Erie County had 661 confirmed flu cases, up from 308 the prior week. Over the same week, flu hospitalizations in Erie County jumped from 50 to 61. Area hospitals such as Oishei's Children's Hospital have seen more positive flu patients. For the week ended December 6th, Children's Hospital had 85 positive flu cases in its emergency department, with 13 patients admitted to the hospital, meaning they couldn't be discharged from the emergency department and needed to stay overnight in the hospital, said hospital president Dr. Steven Turkovich. Next week, which ended December 13th, Children's Hospital had 238 flu cases in the emergency department with 22 admissions. The good news, Turkovich said, is flu admissions and intensive care unit volume are relatively low. This means illness severity has been manageable, though experts are still concerned heading into the holidays with people around each other so much. What's driving this flu surge? Last year's flu season, 24 and 25, was a bad flu year, with the state reporting 22 consecutive weeks of widespread influenza activity all the way up through May 10th. Further, there were 28 influenza-associated pediatric deaths statewide in the 2024-25 season, up from 20 from 23-24 season, and from 14 in 22-23. Russo was hopeful that this year might be better with an immunity buildup from all the influenza infections last season, but a wild card has emerged, a rapidly circulating variant called subclade K, a subgroup of influenza A, H3N2. With 7 new mutations, subclade C is more able to evade immunity from prior infections and vaccinations. While this year's vaccine is not a great match for the new variant, Russo said early data from the United Kingdom shows the flu vaccine still provides good protection against severe illness, including hospitalizations from subclade K. The only problem, 23% of the state's population has received the flu vaccine this year, according to state data. Erie County is slightly better at 26%, but that's still down from prior years. What about COVID-19 and RSV? Flu is the main story here, but COVID-19 and RSV haven't gone away. For the week ending December 13th, there were 3,560 lab-confirmed COVID-19 cases statewide, up 6% from a week earlier. COVID-19 hospitalizations statewide totaled 450 for the week ended December 13th, up from 367 prior week. In the 5-county western New York, there were 40 COVID-19 hospitalizations, up from 32 a week earlier. RSV cases, meanwhile, rose 23% to 3,832 for the week of December 13th. RSV hospitalizations increased 32% to 397 statewide. Dr. John Selleck, an infectious disease expert at Kaleida, expects cases of flu, COVID, and RSV to increase after the holiday activities. Selleck noted experts keep waiting for flu and COVID-19 to synchronize, but the COVID-19 increased in late August and through September before dipping in October and now beginning to steadily rise again. And if experts are concerned about flu vaccine rates, COVID-19 is even worse. Just 7% of the statewide population and 7.5% of Erie County's population have gotten the latest COVID-19 vaccine, according to state data. Typically, Oishei Children's Hospital sees RSV drive its emergency department and hospital admissions this time of year, but so far, Turkovich said RSV has been stable and low. Hospital had 59 RSV cases in the emergency department for the week ending December 13th, only 20 kids admitted. What should you do? By virtue of his profession, Selleck dispenses free medical device all the time to family, friends, and even his golf group. As the season goes on, people ask me, can I still get a flu shot? Selleck said, you can get a flu shot in February. If you're still having a lot of cases, you can get a flu shot in February. But Selleck and other experts don't advise waiting that long. Given flu cases are likely to continue rising in weeks ahead, they say now is as good a time as ever to get the vaccine. After getting a flu shot, it takes up to 2 weeks to build full immunity. While this year's vaccine is imperfect at preventing infection, it still offers protection against severe illness. Charlene Ludlow, Senior Vice President of Nursing at Erie County Medical Center, said influenza has really hit heavy this year, and most of the people with flu being admitted to ECMC are unvaccinated. Ludlow added that the ECMC is seeing a wide range of ages in those hospitalized with flu. In the past, we used to see it more in the elderly population, but this year I had a range all the way from 22 years old up to 93 years old, she said. Other than vaccination, familiar reminders remain this respiratory season. Antiviral treatments are available for flu, Tamiflu, and COVID-19, Paxlovid, but the key is starting them as soon as possible, which means it's important to test to know which infection you have. If you're sick, rest and drink plenty of fluids. If you have respiratory symptoms, that's when you need to stay home, Ludlow said. That's not part of gift giving. Once people are feeling better and their fever has been resolved for 24 hours, Russo, the UB infectious disease expert, said reliable guidance is to wear a high-quality, well-fitting mask around others for the next 5 days. Where does the flu season go from here? Many experts believe this will be another bad flu year, something could become clear as we emerge from the upcoming holiday gatherings that typically fuel the increase in cases. What Russo warns people to remember is that flu is a potentially lethal disease, particularly for high-risk groups, that should be taken seriously. For the week that ended December 13th, New York State reported its first flu-associated pediatric death of the season. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates 1,200 deaths from flu nationwide so far this season. Looking at past seasons from 2010 to 2011 to 2023-24, CDC reported anywhere from 6,300 to 51,000 annual flu deaths across the country. I still think we have 4 to 6 weeks away from the peak, Russo said. What that means is there's more flu to come. County, more suits against Erie County get settled, but county's still fighting multi-million-dollar judgments. 6 months ago, Erie County facing nearly a half dozen civil trials and pushing back against other multi-million-dollar judgments. Then, last month, a federal jury awarded an $80 million judgment against the county for wrongful conviction of Daryl Boyd, a Buffalo man who spent 27 years in prison for murder he swore he didn't commit. At the end, as the end of the year approaches, some cases have been settled and cleared off the table, but several big money cases in which jury has already found the county to be at fault still loom, with judgments totaling more than $130 million. These cases carry long-term implications for the county's finances and future debt. Joel Rudkin, Boyd's lawyer, called the county's refusal to settle its biggest cases, in which the weight of evidence is against the government, irresponsible to taxpayers. This is now the third disastrous big trial in a row for the county, including Metcalf and John Walker, he said. Toth said, no case is settled in a vacuum, but rather at the context of hundreds of cases the county must defend. Some cases settled. Several cases scheduled for trial in the latter half of this year have been settled by the county, Toth said. They include Vincent Sorrentino. Sorrentino, 31, died by suicide in October 2017 when he was found hanging in a shower in the Erie County Correctional Facility. A wrongful death suit was filed against the county and the sheriff's office on behalf of the Sorrentino estate. The case settled earlier this month for $150,000. Estate of Michael Gerard's estate also filed wrongful death against the County of Erie Sheriff's Office. Gerard, a 33-year-old resident of Cheektowaga, died by suicide in May of 2018 when he was found hanging and sustained serious grave injuries. The case was settled for $250,000 in September. Mary Skrabzik's personal injury claim from January 2021 states she was attempting her first run down the sledding hill in Elma Meadows Park when she struck an exposed steel drainage cover at the bottom of the hill. She suffered serious injuries that required extensive medical treatment and surgery. The case was settled for $325,000 in September. Mark Peterson, a Lancaster resident, was walking across the wooden pedestrian bridge at Como Lake Park in 2014 and fell through a bridge plank, suffering severe, painful, and permanent injuries, including injuries to his neck. The trial was scheduled in May. His personal injury case was settled for $350,000 till set. Over the summer, the county also paid a $3.8 million settlement reached in 2024 to the family of India Cummings. The settlement was delayed until her family completed the surrogate court's process to claim the money. Big cases remaining. Two of the biggest cases that Erie County continues to fight involve Boyd and John H. Walker Jr. The trials for Walker and Boyd estate involve two federal cases in which two men were wrongfully imprisoned for decades due to their constitutional right violations at trial. Boyd died of cancer on February 26th. He and Walker claimed they were wrongfully arrested, convicted, and imprisoned in 1976 for the murder of William Crawford, 62 on Fillmore Avenue. The two were 16 at the time. They had sentences overturned by the state judge in 2021 due to trial errors, including the failure by the district attorney's office to disclose information key to their defense. A year ago, the Common Council agreed to settle the cases by paying Boyd and Walker $4.3 million each. Erie County has not settled with either Boyd's estate or Walker. Toth estimates the cost of defending both cases so far exceeding $500,000. Rudin said the county has refused to settle the Boyd case for a fair amount, despite the county's terrible showing at trial. He accused the county of moral blindness. The county called no expert witnesses in our case, whereas they did in the Walker case, and in our case they conceded they used fabricated evidence, he said in an email to Buffalo News, adding this cannot be overemphasized. If they convicted Darrell Boyd using admittedly fabricated evidence, why aren't they taking responsibility for that and settling? It's beyond humane and outrageous to put Darrell's family through this. Toth responded, I'm not going to go tit for tat over the facts of the case. The county is seeking to have $80 million judgment for in the Boyd case reduced. Walker was awarded $28 million judgment against the county in April based on a similar set of facts. In both cases, the county has filed or is in the process of filing post-trial motions arguing the judge who heard both cases should reconsider the outcomes due to errors at trial. Finally, the county continues to appeal the wrongful death case of Richard Metcalf Jr., which so far has cost the county more than $2 million to defend. Metcalf, 35, died in November of 2012. His airway was cut off when deputies tied a mask around his neck and pulled a pillowcase over his head as they restrained him outside the holding center, the State Commission of Corrections found. Jury originally awarded Metcalf estate a $100 million judgment against the county last year, which was later reduced to $20 million by the judge. who also ruled that the county and 5 current former holding center deputies must pay about $5.4 million in attorney fees and costs incurred by the Metcalf estate. The county is appealing. Even if the judgment numbers were reduced, the millions the county could still owe Metcalf and Boyd and Walker cases could result in the county having to issue judgment bonds and borrow money to cover the cost. Despite the high cost, Hill said understanding the county's actions in these cases requires context. He suggested that every case that is settled creates patterns and expectations. All the cases, the hundreds that we handle, are not done in a vacuum, he said. The way in which we handle one case impacts another case. The facts are willing to take a case to trial, even losing, provides flexibility in other matters. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. Time is 9:15. Stefanik cast aside her efforts to cater to Trump. Representative Elise Stefanik, Republican of New York, was willing to be a team player with a stiff upper lip, but everyone has their limits. After a series of public humiliations delivered to her by President Trump, his yanking of her nomination to serve as U.S. ambassador, his Oval Office love fest with New York City Mayor-elect Zohan Mamdani, during which the president undercut her, and the coup de grace of his refusal to endorse her in the Republican primary for governor, Stefanik on Friday afternoon announced she'd had enough. She was done with the governor's race, for which she had raised more than $12 million from donors, and now be frustrated with her decision to pull out. All done with Congress altogether, she said she would not seek re-election next year. Now at war with Speaker Mike Johnson, privately livid at Trump, frustrated by her job in Congress, it's not clear whether Stefanik even has an interest in finishing her term, although people close to her said she planned to stay until her term. My most important title is Mom, she wrote in a long post on social media Friday. People close to Stefanik said she was not upset with the president, noting they had spoken multiple times, including in person over the past few weeks, conversations in which they saw eye to eye about Stefanik's decision and her future. The detractors, Stefanik's shoddy treatment by the president, amounted to karmic comeuppance for a Republican lawmaker who came to Congress as a Harvard-educated moderate, but tacked unapologetically to the MAGA right, which it suited her political purposes. They said she personified the opportunistic shape-shifting that gripped her party. My greatest disappointment is Elise Stefanik, who should know better. Representative Don Beyer, Democrat from Virginia, said in an interview last year, describing her as a one-time friend. She went off the deep end. Her tumble from grace crystallized the limits of the MAGA loyalty and risks of building a political identity around Trump, who can turbocharge or torpedo a career, sometimes both. In truth, Stefanik, first elected in 2014 as the youngest woman to serve in the House, has been burned out on Congress for years. Instead of seeking rise in the House, Stefanik set her sights on serving in a second Trump administration. When every other member of the House Republican leadership ran for Speaker in 2023, she sat it out. Instead, she looked in the mirror and saw a cabinet secretary looking back. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the hard-right Georgia Republican who was a true believer but dared to break publicly with the president on a variety of issues, recently experienced the inevitable falling out with him for doing so. So Trump's treatment of Stefanik was more surprising because no one had ever viewed her as a true believer, and she still never dared to vent frustrations or disagreement with the president. Resilience is one of my strengths, she said in April after the president withdrew her nomination to serve as the UN ambassador. At the time, people close to her, Stefanik, was able to convince herself that she had been victim of difficult political circumstances. Trump and Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at the time were concerned about losing another seat in the House when the majority was already too slim to govern. Plus, Trump was privately telling her that he would reward her down the line with something much better. Her political future looked bright. In casting about for something else, Stefanik looked to the governor's race. Winning a statewide race in New York was always going to be an uphill battle. But Stefanik viewed Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, as weak. She thought she could enhance her own profile if only came within striking distance. But without Trump's endorsement, people who spoke to her said the entire premise became ludicrous. And Trump, who famously hates to back a losing candidate, was holding out. Still, Stefanik said nothing, choosing to channel much of her anger at Johnson. In 2019, former Speaker Ryan described Stefanik in a Time magazine spotlight as the future of hopeful, aspirational politics in America. For a time, it looked like his statement would hold true. When the party transformed itself under Trump, Stefanik seemed to have no qualms about doing what it took to remain in the face of the future. She took off in February of 2020 when Trump hosted the House Republican Conference in the White House East Room after his acquittal in his first impeachment trial. He credited Stefanik with the victory. "You're killing them, Elise. You are killing them," he said, asking Stefanik in a clad bright red dress to stand up and be recognized. But things did not turn out exactly as planned. Part of the strategy of her long-shot bid for governor was to make Mamdani, the far-left face of the Democratic Party. On the campaign trail, she referred to him as a jihadist, the kind of incendiary moniker Trump favors. Given all she had done to remain loyal to the president, Stefanik figured he would back her. Trump did no such thing. When asked if he agreed with Stefanik that the mayor-elect was a jihadist, he responded, "No, I don't. She's out there campaigning, you know. You say things sometimes in a campaign." When Mamdani standing beside him, he added, "You really have to ask her about that. I met with a man who is a very rational person. At least one ally was trying Friday night to give Stefanik a reason for keep fighting. Elise needs to keep her seat and challenge Mike Johnson immediately," Steve Bannon, a former Trump advisor, said, calling her one of the real warriors. Now it's continuing along. How Venezuela went from an ally of the U.S. to a target of Trump. Vice President Richard Nixon feared for his life. A mob angry that the United States had granted asylum to the just deposed and brutal Venezuelan dictator had ambushed his motorcade in the capital city to Caracas, shouting "Death to Nixon." People attacked the gridlocked vehicles with fists, rocks, pipes, and so much spit that Nixon's driver turned on his windshield wipers. "For an instant, the realization passed through my mind, we might be killed," Nixon later wrote. The cars managed to speed away, and the vice president carried on with his visit. But in Washington, the White House was taking no chances. An aircraft carrier task force was soon steaming toward Venezuela in case Nixon needed to be rescued. Nixon departed Venezuela the next day without incident, and while the May 1958 crisis in Caracas sullied Nixon's goodwill toward Latin America, it had a strangely positive effect on U.S. relations with Venezuela. Venezuela was shifting to democracy, blaming the ambush on communist agitators, the fledgling government's weakness. Nixon called the episode a much-needed shock treatment and focused Washington's attention on the country. Thus began an alliance between the U.S. and Venezuela that would last for decades until the dramatic political change in Caracas brought it to a screeching halt roughly 25 years ago. Now, President Trump, massing the military forces in the region and threatening to attack Venezuela, its leftist strongman, Nicolas Maduro, if he doesn't relinquish power, the one-time friends may be at the brink of an all-out war. There's a tremendous alignment with the United States and Venezuela during the 20th century, said Brian Finesca, an adjunct professor at Florida International University and expert on Venezuela. The relationship Frizeka said, was rooted in America's Cold War competition with the Soviet Union and Venezuela's vast oil reserves. Venezuela now, government found its footing. It quickly emerged as the ideal U.S. partner, stable, democratic, awash in oil. It was also staunchly anti-communist. By 1963, President John F. Kennedy, fresh from the confrontation with Havana and the Cuban Missile Crisis, would host a state dinner for Venezuela President Romulo Betancourt, whom he called America's best friend in South America. Washington was soon selling arms to Caracas while U.S. energy companies extracted Venezuelan oil. The two were sometimes linked, as President Nixon considered selling PF Phantom II jets to the country in 1971. A White House aide warned him that the decision could affect legislation in Venezuela's Congress that may adversely affect U.S. oil interests. Nixon wound up selling Venezuela a more advanced plane. U.S. oil interest suffers regardless when Caracas nationalized its oil industry a few years later. Still, the U.S. reaction was muted. It's also in America's interest to have good relations with a key member of the OPEC oil cartel like Venezuela. America's rhetoric about Venezuela's model of democracy often glossed over the country's political and economic flaws. Frizeka noted, in the name of strategic interests, America was far less concerned about things like corruption and human rights and far more about political affinity. America's latest interest drifted from Latin America after the fall of the Soviet Union. Venezuela remained a critical oil supplier, having quietly allowed private companies, including large American ones, to sign lucrative operating agreements, sharing deals. By the late 90s, Venezuela had surpassed Saudi Arabia as America's top oil provider. But few in Washington were closely attuned to the rise of a leftist revolution named Hugo Chavez, who won the Venezuela December 1998 presidential election. Firebrand who emulated Castro, Chavez harnessed popular anger over rampant corruption and poverty, which persisted despite this country's massive oil resources, and promised major constitutional and economic reforms. The United States reacted cautiously at first, hoping that Chavez would mellow once in office. President Bill Clinton even hosted him in the White House in 1999 when Chavez assured officials he wanted good relations with and did not want radical plans. But in April of 2002, attempt to overthrow Chavez changed everything for good. Venezuelan leader pressed his leftist agenda. An alliance of politicians, generals, and business leaders had him arrested amid mutual street protests against his rule, but the coup failed after larger crowds gathered to demand Chavez's return. Chavez turned his ire against the United States, accusing President George Bush administration of trying to overthrow him. From there on, Bush would prove a highly useful foil for Chavez, especially as Bush angered much of the world with his 2003 invasion of Iraq and ruthless pursuit of terrorists. Chavez attacked the U.S. president with relish, including during his famous 2006 address to the United Nations. The devil came here yesterday and it smells of sulfur still today, Chavez told the assembled delegates. The next year, Chavez's government reasserted the state control over Venezuela's oil industry, rolling back the country's previous steps towards privatization and forcing foreign companies to accept minority stakes in the new joint ventures dominated by the state oil firm. When the U.S. oil giants like Exxon and Mobil and ConocoPhillips refused, Chavez seized their assets. Tension is now peaking under Trump, who says Venezuela's role in immigration and drug smuggling into the United States has made national security threat, and that justifies the use of military force. Some Trump key advisors, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, are pushing for Maduro's removal as means of adding the presidents on the communist government of Cuba. Earlier this year, Trump deployed an aircraft carrier into the Caribbean waters near Venezuela, positioning it for a possibly military attack. The move came roughly 50 years after President Dwight D. Eisenhower did the same for the potential mission to rescue Nixon that proved unnecessary. The big question now is whether the outcome will be uneventful this time. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Time is 9:30. Major airstrikes in Syria by U.S. target the Islamic State. The United States carried out major airstrikes against the Islamic State group in Syria, fulfilling President Trump's vow to avenge deaths of 2 U.S. Army soldiers. U.S. fighter jets, helicopters, and artillery fired over 100 munitions and more than 70 suspected Islamic State targets at several locations across central Syria on Friday, including weapons, storage areas, and other buildings to support operations, the military central command said in a statement. It said Jordanian warplanes assisted in the operation. Trump described the action as a massive strike. Social media accounts in Syria reported explosions across wide swaths of the country. The Jordanian military said in a statement that its Air Force participated in precise airstrikes. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth sought to tamp down the fears that the United States might reopen a major new war in the Middle East. This is not the beginning of a war, it's a declaration of vengeance, Hegseth said on social media. Hegseth added, "Today we hunted, we killed our enemies, and we will continue." We hit. In a rally-style speech Friday night in North Carolina, Trump called the attacks very successful. "We hit the ISIS thugs in Syria who were trying to regroup after their decimation by the Trump administration 5 years ago," he said. "We hit them hard. The soldiers slain this month were the first American casualties in the country since the fall of dictator Bashar Assad last year. They were supporting the counterterrorism operations against the Islamic State group Palmyra, a city in central Syria, when they came under fire from a lone gunman," U.S. and Syrian officials said. Friday strikes and likelihood of more counterterrorism operations in the coming days signal a sharp military escalation in Syria when the United States has reduced its presence and there's about 1,000 troops, half of what it started with at the beginning of the year. But the assault this month was a stark reminder of the danger in the region and the quandary of whether to keep the U.S. forces there. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, though initial assessments suggest that it was likely carried out by the Islamic State group, according to the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence. Top U.S. intelligence officials told Congress this year that the Islamic State group would try to exploit the end of the Assad government to free 9,000 to 10,000 of its militant group fighters and about 26,000 of the family members now detained in the northeastern Syria and revive its ability to plot and carry out attacks. Although it no longer holds much territory, the Islamic State still spending its radical ideology through clandestine cells and regional affiliates outside of Syria and online. Last year, the group behind the major attacks in Iran, Russia, and Pakistan. The deadly attacks against the U.S. soldiers also highlighted the challenges for the nascent Syrian government led by President Amal al-Sarraj as it steers a deeply fractured country emerging from nearly 14 years of civil war. Since his rebel coalition toppled the Assad government, al-Sarraj has had to contend with threats from the Islamic State group and various other armed groups while simultaneously building a national military. In the months after al-Sarraj took power, the United States conducted scores of airstrikes on Islamic redoubts in the Syrian desert, which appeared to tamp down the immediate threat. But in the past month, particularly after al-Sarraj publicly embraced the international campaign to combat the group, attacks have increased, analysts said. The attack in Palmyra marked the first U.S. casualties in Syria since Assad was ousted from power a year ago, and underscored how Islamic group has exploited security gaps to target civilians and al-Shura forces. Syria's foreign ministry said Friday that the Syrian Arab Republic reiterates its steadfast commitment to fighting ISIS and ensuring it has no safe havens on Syrian territory. It will continue to intensify military operations against it whenever it poses a threat. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in the country's northeast praised the United States strikes for hitting hideouts of the ISIS terrorist organizations in Syria. 3 other American service members and 2 members of the Syrian security forces were also wounded in this month's attack, which U.S. officials described as an ambush. The Syrian gunmen who killed the soldiers, 2 members of the Iowa National Security Guard and an American civil interpreter, was a member of Syrian security forces who was set to be dismissed over his extremist views. The officials said, in honor of the slain soldiers' home state, the Pentagon is calling the mission that started Friday Operation Hawkeye Strike. U.S. military officials said Friday that the strikes would build up to nearly 80 missions since July to eliminate terrorist operatives in Syria, including Islamic State remnants. In a statement this past week, the Pentagon Central Command said the group has inspired at least 11 plots of attacks against targets in the United States over the past year. In response, the command said its operations resulted in 119 insurgents being detained and 14 killed over the past 6 months. More uncertainty unfolds for the global economy. Despite being swatted about like a tetherball by the ever-shifting trade wars, shortages of critical minerals, and tense standoffs between the United States and China, the global economy has turned out to be more resilient than predicted. But the whirlwind shows no sign of stopping. We're living through a singular turbulent time, said Doron Acemoglu, an economist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who in 2024 won the Nobel Peace Prize in Economic Science. Transformational changes continue to rattle the economy, including revolution in artificial intelligence, rapidly aging populations, climate change, and worldwide turn against liberal democracy and a rules of international order, all of which poised to remake jobs, policies, politics, and lives. The transition has been complicated by chaotic economic policy making around the world this year. In the United States, contradictory pronouncements are regularly issued from the Oval Office, and as tariffs are enacted and retracted without warning. Last month, for instance, President Trump lifted tariffs on beef, tomatoes, bananas, coffee, and other groceries, while last week he threatened to raise them on rice in India and in China. Delayed price increases from tariffs are still working their way through the U.S. economy. On the spending side, the Trump has vowed to use $250 billion pot of money generated by tariffs to pay out trillions of dollars to farmers, taxpayers, and creditors. Public debt has shot up to record levels, reaching 125% of the country's total output. And the dizzying rise in the stock market, pumped by AI companies, is fueling fortunes and fears of a future crash. In Europe, most countries continue to be plagued by slower growth other than other advanced economies. For several years now, the European Union's share of the global economy has been shrinking amid sharper competition from the United States and China. Investment in AI has also fallen far behind. Europe has a huge innovation problem in the tech sector, said Amsuglu. With 27 members that have varying priorities and domestic pressures, the European Union has enormous difficulty carrying out critical policy recommendations like strengthening its single market for trade and capital, streamlining its regulations, and signing on to new trade pacts. This past week, for example, the EU delayed a vote on whether to approve a trade deal with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay that has been in the works for decades. Producers and manufacturers are held back by high energy prices and face growing competition from cheap Chinese exports before Trump tariffs would have been directed to the United States. Security threats are pushing European governments to further strain budgets and dig deeper into the debt as they devolve substantially more resources to the military. The war in Ukraine grinds on, and President Vladimir Putin of Russia has shown little sign of curbing his aggressive stance. Trump continues to enfeeble America's commitment to Atlantic Alliance. A recent Danish intelligence analyst warned the United States no longer rules out of the use of military force, even against allies. China is still suffering from the collapse of the real estate market and a pullback in property, infrastructure, and manufacturing investments. China's economic influence, though building a record $1 trillion global trade surplus, shows that Trump's tariffs has done little to dampen the country's trade domination or its reliance on exports to propel its economy. The International Monetary Fund recently revised the country's annual growth forecast to 5%. Okay, you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News. The time is 9:40. Now let's look at some more stories. We're going with the story for Super Sunday. Super Sunday gives Black Friday a run for the money. Black Friday gets all the hype, and to be sure, it's worthy of some of it. But really, the big day for holiday shopping was Saturday. The Friday after Thanksgiving has been called Black Friday because it's traditionally been the day that retailers flip from being in the red and losing money, so when black is making money. But the meaning of that one day has been diluted over the years. Its urgency and name recognition to start sales earlier, as early as summer, and get people primed to spend. It's also the day people believe discounts to be the deepest and sales to be the most favorable. But there's another day each year that sneaks up and often breaks that sales record, Super Saturday, the Saturday before Christmas. It's expected to break record sales this year, especially as the late falling Thanksgiving gives shoppers less time to finish up their to-do lists. Also known as Panic Saturday, it's the final big push for the holiday shopping season, when those who have not yet crossed everyone off their Christmas list scramble to finish up their holiday shopping. With days before Christmas, many shoppers will be out at the brick and mortar stores in full force, where you have online shopping deadlines and might not come through in time for the big day. As the final Saturday before December 25th, Super Saturday is a big significant shopping event for both consumers and retailers, said Catherine Cohen, NRF Vice President of the Industry and Consumer Insights. The National Retail Federation, which relies on data from a Prosper Analytics survey, expects a record of 159 million people to shop on Super Saturday this year. That's up from 157.2 million shoppers last year and breaks the previous record of 158.5 million in 2022. As of December 10th, the average shopper has completed roughly half of the holiday shopping. To finish up, consumers plan to shop online, 46%, department stores, 33%, and discount stores, 26%. So far this year, clothing and accessories have been the most popular gift people surveyed bought, 48%, followed by toys, 30%, gift cards, 27%, books, movies, music, video games, and other media, 25%, personal care, beauty items, 23%. Overall, the NRF said holiday spending will surpass $1 trillion for the first time in history, with sales growing somewhere between 3.7 and 4.2 compared to last year. Experimental gifts continue to be in demand. 3 in every 10 shoppers are planning to give an experience this year, such as classes or event tickets. That number has grown over the past 10 years, when just over 2 in every 10 shoppers expected to give an experience. Along with tangible items, gifts of experience continue to be a popular choice for people looking to create memories with loved ones, says Phil Rist, Prosper Insights and Analytics Executive and Vice President of Strategy. Continuing along now, state funding boost housing projects for the homeless. As the federal government cuts funding for supportive housing, New York State is stepping in with new funding for the homeless housing, including 3 projects in Western New York. Governor Kathy Hochul announced more than $125 million in funding awards for 13 projects across the state. The commitments include nearly $25 million for the projects in Cheektowaga, Westfield, and Jamestown that would create 92 units of new housing. Besides housing, the project will provide on-site support services for veterans, frail, elderly, survivors of domestic violence, and people with serious mental illness or substance disorders. Creating new supportive housing, which creates affordable housing and services as a fundamental part of our work to address the housing and homelessness crisis in our state. Hochul said the investment will help families and individuals who have experienced homelessness across the state remain stably housed while supporting strong neighborhoods and a brighter future for New Yorkers. Eagle Star Housing will get $6.5 million to construct a 1-story building in Cheektowaga with 20 units of beds and transitional housing for homeless veterans, designed to look like a house with central gathering spaces for living, dining, and cooking. The new Cheektowaga Veterans Home will preserve 16 existing beds and add 4 new ones. We're honored to receive this award from New York State and the HHAP, Homeless Housing Assistance Program, in support for our mission to serve homeless veterans, said Eagle Star executive Zach Fuller. Together, we're building a stronger, more supportive community for our veterans. DePaul Properties will receive $15 million to develop 3-story Granary apartments with 60 units and 103 beds, permanent supportive housing in Wheatfield. The all-electric solar-ready building also will include an additional 20 affordable units for people with mental illness. DePaul looks forward to the opportunity to uplift vulnerable populations, said DePaul President Mark Fuller. The Granary project is also supported by Dormitory Authority of New York State. Projects like this strengthen the communities and help our most vulnerable neighbors to develop and rebuild their lives with dignity and stability, DASNY CEO Robert Rodriguez said. Citizens Opportunity for Development and Equality will use $3.2 million to develop 12 units of permanent supportive housing in Jamestown as part of the all-electric Blooming Gardens project to construct and rehab 18 buildings across 12 sites with a total of 48 units and 140 beds. The HAP award is a vital component of making the Blooming Gardens project a reality, enabling us to create safe, affordable, and supportive housing for individuals and families in the need, said Citizens Opportunities Executive Christopher Jock. HAP program still has $25 million in funds available to award to preserve and stabilize existing supportive housing, plus $1 million for emergency shelter repairs. Now let's, as part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need any further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Ansel, Senior, Richard P. Bonifaciuto, Karen. Boyle, John P. Jack. Burley, Mary. Kane, Jane Ann. Carson, Judith Lee. Chu, Doris E. Nee Gazelle. Church, Jacqueline K. Nee Kempa. Clow, Kevin P. Cohen, Ronald S. DeChario, June D. Duryea, Senior, Vincent A. Evans, Matthew. Fisher, Beverly A. Nee Crane. Ford, Jr., Francis C. Frank. Gillis, Carol. Lee, Nee Maley. Goldstone, Cheryl, Nee Meyer. Harrigan, Dennis P. Harrington, Antoinette E. Nee DeVoso. Jager, Frank J. Jankowski, Ronald A. Jenny, Loretta E. Kalenic, Robert Joseph. Kellner, Linda. Killian, Nee Raymond, Irene M. Krug, Cynthia A. Nee Melody. Lickfeld, Maeve Margaret. Myrtle, Andrew James. Montana, Josephine P. Nee LaCourte. Muruck, Karen L. Nee Co. Murray, Thelma, Teddy, R. Nee Harrison. Olmsted, Gloria Jean, Nee McCurdy. O'Neill, Kenneth. Petrus, Michael G. Prang, Michael W. Protzush, Marjorie Eileen. Raymond, Nancy C. Nee Menders. Reedy, Mary Ann, Mimi, Donahoe. Roberts, Rudy G. Roberts, Tina. Ross, Martha A. Sambora, Richard S. Shutram, Jr., Robert J. Shaw, Lowell, Spike. Smith, Kenneth N. Speed, Ronald D. Stencil, Natalie T. Nee Przbilski. Stocker, Alan. Stringfeld, Mary Agnes, Nee Blackburn. Sutton, Kathleen J. Nee Goodspeed. Zimmerman, Mary Ann, Nee Kleinfelder. Whitty, Raymond E. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Now let's take a look at the horoscopes. Okay, December 21st, 2025. You are direct and forceful. You are also resourceful, constructive, and strong-willed. This is a year of service for you, perhaps service to family. The stars show the kind of day you'll have. 5 dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. Aries, March 21st to April 19th. 3 stars. Others see you as successful, ambitious, and capable. Meanwhile, travel or plans to travel will appeal to you because you want to go places. Tonight, you're admired. Taurus, 4 stars. April 20th to May 20th. Today and for the next several weeks, you desire to travel and explore your world is strong. Travel is one choice, but you can also gain new knowledge through books, films, and courses. Tonight, explore. Gemini, May 21st to June 20th. 3 stars. Your focus on shared property and finance is strong today and in the coming weeks. If you're in conflict with someone, Venus makes you diplomatic. Tonight, check your finances. Cancer, June 21st to July 22nd, 3 stars. Starting today, you and in the next several weeks, you'll need more sleep because the sun will be opposite your sign. Tonight, cooperate. Leo, July 23rd to August 22nd, 3 stars. Today is your beginning of a 4-week window that will boost your energy and make you work hard. You will set high bar, giving yourself demanding standards. Tonight, work. Virgo, August 23rd to September 22nd. 4 stars. Although this is a productive day, it's also a playful day. Explore the arts, sport events, entertainment world, and fun activities with kids. Tonight, socialize. Libra, September 23rd to October 22nd, 3 stars. Today your focus is on home, family, and your private life. Because visiting guests, residential moves, or changes taking place at home demand your attention for the next 4 weeks. Tonight, Cocoon. Scorpio, October 23rd to November 21st. 4 stars. The pace of your days will accelerate with a busy schedule full of short trips, visits, and errands, and increased activity with siblings and relatives. Tonight, conversations. Sagittarius, November 22nd to December 21st. 3 stars. This is a great day to chat with others. Money and finances are on your mind now and for the next few weeks. Tonight, check your belongings. Capricorn, December 22nd to January 19th. 4 stars. Today, the sun enters your sign to stay for 4 weeks. This happens only once a year, and when it does, it gives you a chance to recharge your batteries for the rest of the year. Tonight, you win. Aquarius, January 20th to February 18th. 3 stars. Today and in the next few weeks, you'll be more low-key. Take time to jot down some goals for your new year ahead. Goals you give focus, a sense of purpose, and make decision-making easier. Tonight, privacy. Pisces, February 19th to March 20th. 4 stars. You're keen to socialize with others today. In fact, this enjoyment of friends and groups will last for the next 4 weeks. It's time to find out who your friends are. Find your tribe. Are these my people? Tonight, be friendly. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for December 21st. We read from the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. It's 716-821-5555. Your reader today has been Ron Bickelman.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your reader is Florine Melnick. Let's go to city and region. Suspect in Allentown killings was delusional, expert says. By Aaron Bessaker. Buffalo police earlier this year discovered Brian M. Chiclana inside an Allentown home where two men were killed, their bodies found bludgeoned in separate rooms in the basement. Because Chiclana was speaking Spanish, officers initially had difficulty communicating with him. He had what appeared to be cuts on his neck, so they called for an ambulance. With the help of a Spanish-speaking officer on the phone and an EMT who grew up speaking the language, the man who would eventually face murder charges answered some questions at the scene. He also made an odd statement at the hospital. Details about what Chiclana said emerged in recent court hearings over the legal admissibility of his statements. Those statements include telling someone he was hearing voices and he thought people were trying to kill him. And now a defense expert who reviewed medical records and examined him has opined that Chiclana was not responsible for his actions. Chiclana's defense attorneys on Friday filed a report with the court from Luis Rosell, a psychologist working for an Iowa-based consulting firm. Quote, in his report, he concludes that at the time of the incident that Mr. Chiclana was in a delusional state, that he was actively psychotic, and in our expert's opinion, he was not responsible for his actions because of the severe mental disease and or defect that he was suffering from at the time, unquote. Defense attorney Robert Cutting said in court Friday morning. Chiclana's attorneys, who had said they planned to offer a psychiatric defense, has previously asserted that Chiclana was, quote, in a delusional state of extreme paranoia, unquote, around the time of the killings. State Supreme Court Justice M. William Baller, in a ruling issued Monday, barred prosecutors from using a small part of what Chiclana said. The portion involving answers to some questions that the officers directed the EMT to ask. Baller ruled that the EMT, quote, was acting as an agent of the police, unquote, when officers directed her to ask Chiclana questions. At the time, Chiclana was handcuffed to a gurney in the back of an ambulance and hadn't been read his Miranda warnings, Baller ruled. Chiclana, 35, faces first and second-degree murder charges for the March 4th slayings of Michael Mickey Harmon and Jordan Salado in their St. Louis Place apartment. Harmon, 40, was a community activist, artist, event organizer, business owner, and LGBTQ plus advocate. Salado, 37, was an artist and DJ. No trial date has been set. The case will be transferred to another judge following Baller's retirement at the end of the year. At the scene, Buffalo police were called to a home on St. Louis Place initially to investigate potential trespassing, which was later upgraded to a call of a person with a knife. A friend of Harmon and Salado's went there because he hadn't heard from them. That person saw someone in the window who didn't live there, police said. Officers John Gravius and Sean Ford arrived at St. Louis Place about 4:45 p.m. Two lieutenants were already on the scene. The supervisors were standing at the front door when a man in a black coat walked out, Ford testified. That man, who would later learn was Chiclana, had injuries on both sides of his neck and blood on his face, Ford said. A knife was recovered at the scene, police said. Chiclana seemed to be a little bit out of it, Ford testified, and was very unresponsive even to body language. They patted him down, found no weapons, and walked him over to their patrol vehicle, where they sat him without handcuffs in the back seat. Gravius testified that he first tried to use Google Translator on his cell phone. Gravius then got a fellow officer who was off duty on the phone who could speak Spanish, providing some background and telling her what questions to ask. Through the translation by Officer Liana Rodriguez, the officers on the scene learned Chiclana made the cuts on his neck himself, Ford said. At one point, as Chiclana was being walked over to the Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program at ECMC, an unhanded Chiclana tried running away, Ford said. Police read him his rights in Spanish at the hospital, and he asked for an attorney. Our next article is Hochul takes action on gas lines, prisons, gaming at the 11th hour by Robert Gavin. Albany. Calling it an affordability issue, Governor Kathy Hochul on Friday signed a bill into law to repeal a longstanding rule that required gas companies to provide free connections to new customers who live within 100 feet of an existing gas line. Hochul's repeal of the 100-foot rule came on a day when the Buffalo-born Democrat needed to approve or veto 120 bills by midnight or watch them all automatically pass into law. Among other actions, the governor signed a package of legislation intended to reform a state prison system reeling from the officer-inflicted killings of 2 inmates, understaffing, surging violence, and a 22-day strike. Hochul also signed bills to increase state oversight for AI developers, keep civil defendants from repeatedly delaying lawsuits, and to allow veterans and fraternal organizations to offer electronic bell jar games to raise money for charity. Hochul vetoed, among other bills, a proposal to create a new 25-year retirement plan for police officers at Erie County Medical Center. The repeal of the 100-foot rule marked a victory for environmentalists who championed the proposal, initially part of a broader bill called the New York Home Energy Affordable Transition Act, or New York HEAT Act, as a way to move New Yorkers off fossil fuels and onto electricity. Supporters of the bill said it would lower the cost to ratepayers who were bearing the cost of the free hookups for new customers. It's simply unfair, especially when so many people are struggling right now, to expect existing utility ratepayers to foot the bill for a gas hookup at a brand new house that is not their own, Hochul said in a statement. I have made affordability a top priority, and doing away with this 40-year subsidy that has outlived its purpose will help with that. The bill faced opposition from every Republican state lawmaker in western New York, as well as from Assembly Member William Conrad, D., Democrat, Tonawanda, Senator April Baskin, D., Buffalo, the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership, and National Fuel. The rest of the region's Democratic lawmakers backed the bill, which was sponsored by Assembly Member Joanne Simon, Democrat, Brooklyn, and Senator Liz Krueger, Democrat, Manhattan. Quote, Kathy Hochul just gave New Yorkers a $600 million Christmas present by signing our bill to repeal the 100-foot rule, Krueger said in a statement. Unquote. This is a massive win for New York's gas customers and for clean air and a livable climate. Earlier Friday, Hochul signed the prison reform legislation sponsored by Assembly Member Eric Dylon and Senator Julia Salazar, both Brooklyn Democrats and chairs of the committees on corrections in their houses. The sponsors, Hochul and State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, which runs the state prison system, worked out changes to the bill before Hochul signed off on it. Quote, although the final legislative package does not include everything we sought, it is still a serious step toward making our state prisons less violent, unquote, Salazar said in a statement. Quote, for too long, our prisons have been plagued by staff abuse toward incarcerated individuals with little to no recourse, unquote. Our next article, developer gives up Grand Island land to Seneca Nation. 207-acre site was eyed as an Amazon distribution center by Stephen T. Watson, a major local developer who has tried and failed to build on the island, now says he's giving up the property and donating it to the Seneca Nation of Indians. Quest Development's Michael Huntress told the Buffalo News late Friday that he will donate the company's 2,007-acre parcel on Long Road to the Senecas while he pursues litigation in federal district court against the town for violating his rights as a property owner. The Senecas said they are weighing their options for the property. This land near the Interstate 190 was a proposed site of a massive Amazon distribution center until pushback on the island prompted the e-commerce giant to move the project to the town of Niagara. Huntress has grown frustrated at the town's refusal to let him move forward with this and other redevelopment proposals for the property, even as he said he has invested millions of dollars in a sewer system on the expectation those approvals would come. Huntress accuses Grand Island officials of changing town law to limit the size of warehouses and distribution centers in a transparent bid to block his project alone. Town leaders have previously said they are responding to the concerns of residents and working to properly manage growth on the island. Now Huntress said he's giving up trying to do anything with the property his company has owned since the early 1990s. He said he's pursuing a compensation for his financial losses in federal court and donating the land to the Seneca Nation. Quote, Aquest has fully exhausted its efforts to bring economic development and substantial tax revenue to the residents of the town of Grand Island and has now donated the land to the Seneca Nation of Indians, the rightful owners of Grand Island. Unquote, Huntress said in an email. Quote, it is a great day for liberty, unquote. Michael Huntress and his father William sold the land for $1 to the Senecas in a transaction recently approved by the Seneca Nation Council. The nation said in a statement to the news on Saturday morning, quote, we don't have any definite plans for the land yet, but a site of this size and in this location creates a number of potential economic development opportunities, unquote. Seneca Nation President John Conrad Seneca said in the statement. Quote, as we continue to try to grow and strengthen our economy and provide for the quality of life needs for our people, land is a vital asset. Aquest has owned the undeveloped 2,007-acre site at 2780 Long Road near a Niagara Thruway interchange for about 35 years. The company says in its lawsuit filed on Thursday that it received town approval early on to construct a $1.65 million square foot light industrial and office facility at the site. Aquest says the project went through an extensive environmental impact review, and the company agreed, as directed by the town, to build a sanitary sewer district to serve the site. The system was finished in 2020 and began serving neighboring customers, even though Aquest had not built anything on its property. In February of that year, a national developer submitted plans for a 5-story, 3.8 million square foot distribution center for Amazon at the site. However, the proposal ran into opposition, and in August 2020, the developer pulled the plug on the distribution center and moved the planned facility to Niagara County. 4 months later, Aquest came back with a proposal for a single-story, 1.1 million square foot warehouse on the Long Road site. While the Amazon project required rezoning the property, the Aquest warehouse would fit within its light industrial and research, or M1 zoning. Residents objected to this proposal too, and the town board soon eyed amending the town zoning code to further restrict warehouses and distribution centers on the island. Grand Island Planning Board and Erie County officials objected to the code changes, with county officials saying the restrictions could limit economic development. Town board members had previously said the proposed zoning changes aren't aimed at any one project and would allow for case-by-case flexibility. But a Aquest lawsuit states the zoning amendment, quote, was designed to target the Long Road site. The town board in August passed local law number 2, which limits the square footage of all buildings on a business campus in the M1 zoning district to a maximum of 350,000 square feet, and further bars distribution facilities from operating in an M1 district. Aquest argues that the company is further limited because this square footage cap considers other businesses using a common sewer district, such as the one built by Aquest that now serves a hotel, among other off-site venues. The developer said it would be restricted to building a facility of no more than 189,000 square feet. We held up our end of the bargain. Sadly, the town did not do the same. We built and installed the sewer system they required, and they responded by taking away our property rights, Michael Huntress said in his email. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is City's Repository of Stained Glass is World Famous. National accreditation body headquartered at Trinity Church. Have you ever met anyone who hated stained glass? And this is by Elizabeth Licata. Megan McElfresh says she hasn't, and she's been around a lot of it. McElfresh is executive director of the Stained Glass Association of America, which happens to be headquartered in the offices of Buffalo's Trinity Episcopal Church. That shouldn't be too surprising, after all. Trinity is one of the two places in the world that has stained glass windows by both Louis Comfort Tiffany and John Lafarge, whose bitter late 19th century rivalry may have been unpleasant for them, but had a wonderful effect on stained glass artistry. Within blocks of Trinity, additional examples of gorgeous glass can be found at Westminster Presbyterian, St. Louis Catholic Church, First Presbyterian, and Temple Beth Zion, just to name a few, local houses of worship where stained glass mastery can be appreciated. But all that luminous beauty is not really why a 122-year-old hub for the stained glass industry, the only accrediting body for architectural stained glass in the U.S., happens to have its offices in Buffalo. The real reason is McElfresh, a 39-year-old force of nature who told the SGAA hiring committee that she wasn't about to move to Missouri, was never ever leaving Buffalo, and if they hired her as executive director, they'd have to move the offices here. According to McElfresh, that was no problem. Quote, they said, "Go pack the truck." And I was like, what? Now? Really? And we've been here ever since, unquote. Talk about a dream location. If you're a stained glass maven, where else would you rather be than Trinity? Quote, I get to walk into one of the most important collections of American stained glass in the country whenever I want to, unquote, McElfresh says. Quote, you can feel stained glass. It's an experience. It's not like a painting on a wall. It's an art of light and atmosphere and weather and service, unquote. McElfresh, who grew up in the Florida Keys, has lived in Buffalo since 2011, makes a point about stained glass in a cold climate. Quote, during my first winter here, it actually wasn't the cold that got me. It was the 6 straight months of sunless days. It was such an emotional winter for me, but I could walk into any sacred space, even civic buildings and houses, with all this stained glass, these colorful, soul-filling spaces. In the Rust Belt, this is like medicine, unquote. Maybe that's why Western New York is still home to a large community of stained glass artisans, as well as suppliers such as Sunshine Glassworks Limited, which stocks more than 1,500 colors of glass and Technoglass, which makes cutting-edge tools for glassworkers. Stained glass isn't something you learn to do in school, but many people pick it up anyway. Maybe because so many of us grew up with it, resting our eyes on it during church services of unendurable length. It lacks the intimidation factor of other art forms. It's so familiar. Excuse me. My uncle, Dennis Kenny, is a good example of a typical stained glass artisan. Though by profession he is a semi-retired high school administrator, he has been making things out of stained glass since the 70s, learning techniques along the way from lifelong practitioners. These days, when he is not being asked to come out of retirement for another temporary principal stint, Kenny restores old pieces of stained glass, including most recently a circa 1890 window rescued from a demolished Livingston County church. I felt so good about it, he's told me, because that window is history, and now it's solid as a rock. McElfresh studied economics and math in college. I hated it, but I wanted to get a real job, unquote, she says. Even though she grew up around stained glass, her grandmother had started working with it in the late 70s, and McElfresh's mother followed suit. She didn't see it as a career option, but she also couldn't stay away and attended classes and workshops throughout her day jobs in various offices. Quote, I learned how to sculpt it and cast it and fuse it, and then I'd always come back to putting it in windows, she says. When she moved to Buffalo, McElfresh set up her own studio, McElf Glassworks, on Pratt Street, near Broadway. While at that location, McElfresh worked with artists Augustina Droz and Chuck Tingley to create Maston Park's Ray of Light mural, which contains 2 concrete and mosaic columns as well as a painted mural. These days, McElfresh doesn't get to make too much stained glass. She's an office-bound administrator most of the time and jokes, quote, studying economics and math made me a good fit for arts administration, which is the only thing you can do and make less at, I think, than being an artist, unquote. Our next feature is from page A1, from the front page. Some churches bid farewell to eulogies. Crude remarks, lengthy speeches aren't suited for church, priests say. By J. Tokaz. Curse words spoken from the church altar. A beer cracked open at the lectern. Inappropriate stories that infuriated family members of the deceased. The Reverend Michael Lamarca has seen and heard enough. About a month ago, Lamarca banned eulogies and words of remembrance at Catholic funeral masses in his parishes. Quote, content and length kept becoming an issue, unquote, he said. The final straw for Lamarca happened not long ago when a eulogist shared anecdotes about the deceased that were totally out of line for church. Quote, I felt bad for the family with the stories that were told, unquote, Lamarca said. Quote, he was the only one laughing while he was telling the story, unquote. A notice about the new policy for the 5 parishes that make up the Catholic community of the Tonawondas began appearing in church bulletins in November. The notice stated that the Catholic funeral mass doesn't include eulogies, and that they have been added over the years as a custom. Quote, sadly, because of words used, inappropriate stories shared, lack of decorum, and length of some, eulogies cannot continue. There will be no exceptions to this practice, unquote, the notice said. Pastors in the Buffalo Diocese have discretion over whether to allow eulogies or words of remembrance, even though they are not technically part of the Mass of Christian burial. Quote, it's not a diocesan regulation, unquote, said the Reverend Sean D. Maria, vicar forain for the Southern Erie Vicariate of the diocese. Many pastors do allow them, with the caveat that remarks be limited to 3 to 5 minutes, usually at the end of the Mass, but sometimes just prior to the priest's homily. Some pastors require remarks to be submitted in writing beforehand to ensure that they're suitable for a church setting. But those guardrails sometimes aren't enough. Speakers ramble for 10 or 15 minutes or break down in grief at the lectern. Some people deviate from what they wrote and stumble into ill-advised, colorful language with no one to stop them. At that point, no priest is likely to cut the speaker short. Quote, it would be worse to stand up there and say, okay, we've had enough. You've said enough. Let's go. De Maria said. Or Di Maria. That doesn't look good, unquote. Prior to his current post, Di Maria serves as pastor of St. John Paul II Parish in Lakeview. The parish policy when he arrived there did not allow eulogies or words of remembrance, and Di Maria said he maintained the policy for a little while. But Di Maria said he believes it is good for family and friends to be able to say something about their departed loved ones, especially since the priest often doesn't know the person well and is limited in a homily to speaking about how the deceased lived in accordance with the scriptures. He soon began allowing remarks about the deceased in the church, immediately after the closing prayer of the Mass. Quote, I thought it was important for the family and the friends, but I really didn't want to do it at the Mass because of the issues that sprang up, unquote, he said. Quote, the Mass is extremely important, unquote. Still, Di Maria understands why some pastors have chosen to forbid remarks altogether at funeral masses, especially because almost no one keeps them brief. The lengthy speeches, according to Di Maria and other priests, can hold up funeral homes, cemetery personnel, restaurants that host funeral breakfasts and lunches, and police who help guide funeral processions. Quote, I understand both sides, he said. Monsignor Robert E. Zapfel remembers conferring with the parish council of St. Leo the Great Church in Amherst about a ban on eulogies after he was appointed pastor there in 2002. A previous pastor had imposed the restriction. Quote, far and away, the consensus was, this is what they're used to, and they prefer to leave it the way it was, unquote, Zapfel said. He kept the ban in place for his entire pastorate at St. Leo until he was appointed vicar forain for the Northern Area Vicariate in 2023. That, quote, that was a hard and fast rule, no exceptions. Once you start giving exceptions, then some people will say, some are more connected than others, and they're doing favors for some, he said. So it was absolutely 100%. Lamarca said he hasn't encountered too much resistance to the new policy, which applies to all funerals at St. Christopher, St. Amelia, and St. Francis of Assisi in Tonawanda, and Our Lady of Czestochowa in North Tonawanda. Quote, families that have perhaps been initially disappointed when we explained it to them, they've been understanding of it, he said. Our next feature is from E8, Asking Eric. Clergy spouse keeps rummaging through church office. Dear Eric, I am a clergy person with a comfortable office study at the church building. I love the space. It's where the great bulk of my work gets done. I also love my wife, but she is pretty boundaryless regarding my office space. This is problematic for a few reasons. One is that I often have confidential information about parishioners on my desk, sometimes notes on financial aid we've given or notes on pastoral counseling situation. These things are not lying out in the open, but my spouse will come into the office and, as she talks, will casually flip through paperwork on my desk. It's not cool. I understand that the pastor's office study is a unique space where many people come and expect to feel right at home, but she is constantly coming in, moving things, using it for her own storage, or making suggestions or criticisms about the decor. In general, her things expand to fill the available space. At home, and her classroom, too. I've tried every kind of way I can to address the concern I have with all of this, but it leads to defensiveness and arguments. What advice would you give a guy who just wants his office to be his office? Seeking sanctuary. Dear Sanctuary, put a lock on the door. If you've got confidential material in the office, it's probably a good idea for it to be secured away. I'm a little hazy about why she has so much access to the office. Is she coming from home to the church on a regular basis? Or do you also live at the church? Either way, it's simply not communal, married property. It belongs to your job. She can respect that, or she can learn how to pick a lock. That said, a lock only solves part of the problem. The larger issue is that your wife is showing a profound lack of respect for your job, your space, and the privacy of your parishioners. This is dangerous for your church and also for your marriage. At this point, I'd suggest you talk it through in marriage counseling. If she's responding with defensiveness about moving things into your office and looking at papers you've asked her not to, it's hard to see a path forward without a neutral third party who can help sort out what's going on. As you well know, a counselor can help you both hear each other more clearly, and ideally can help her see the problem and choose other behaviors. Dear Eric, my spouse and I have been married for 3 years. My spouse's ex still has my spouse displayed publicly in their social media profile picture. They have been asked repeatedly to remove the photo, and they have refused to do so. The reason that this is such an issue is because my spouse's ex was extremely abusive and yet accused my spouse of every terrible thing under heaven during the divorce in order to get as much alimony as possible. This person made the entire process so much longer and so much more painful than it needed to be, and yet still has the audacity to keep my spouse on display. I find it sick and disturbing. What action can we take to get this photo removed from my spouse's social media? Dear Concerned, legal protections regarding online photos can vary by state, so your best option is to consult an attorney who can tell you if there is any recourse. This could be a violation of privacy or harassment. However, continuing to be engaged with this person, even indirectly through an attorney, sounds like it's only going to bring some more strife to your life. If the pictures aren't inappropriate, one option is to block the ex. Even if the ex is pretending to friends that the divorce didn't happen, it's not up to you to convince them that it did. It may bring you more peace to cut the ex out of your proverbial picture. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next feature is from the sports section. Sabres defense pivots with loss of Timmins. Rachel Lindsay. Suddenly, the Buffalo Sabres need to pivot on defense. Defenseman Connor Timmins, a key cog on the penalty kill and one of the NHL's consistent shot blockers, is out for a minimum of 6 weeks due to a broken leg. As a result, Buffalo's defense will shuffle itself as it prepares to play its final 3 games before the NHL's holiday break, which will begin December 23rd and run through December 26th. Timmins sustained the injury with less than 6 minutes left in the third period of the Sabres' 5-3 win Thursday against the Flyers, when he got tangled with teammate Jordan Greenway in the neutral zone near the penalty boxes, fell to the ice, and had to be helped to the locker room. Now the Sabres have to compensate for the absence of one of their top shot blockers and penalty killers. Quote, Timmer has been really, really solid this year, unquote, said Michael Kesselring, who returned to the Sabres lineup against the Flyers after missing 14 games due to a leg ankle sprain. Simplicity, Kesselring said, is what has defined Timmins as a defenseman. He moves the puck really well, moves it at a high level, and he's been eating shots, unquote, Kesselring said. He's been great on the PK, so it's a big loss for us, and obviously me. Coming back now, hopefully I can pick up some of the slack and everybody does what they can to pick up. The Sabres acquired Timmins in June from the Pittsburgh Penguins as part of a trade for defenseman Connor Clifton. Timmins, who is from St. Catharines, Ontario, has played in all 33 games this season. He brought versatility to the Sabres' defense, regularly matching up against an opposing team's top line, played on the penalty kill, and has 25 hits, 6 assists, and has blocked 70 shots this season while averaging nearly 20 minutes of ice time per game. As of Friday morning, Timmins, St. Louis defenseman Justin Falk, and Seattle defenseman Adam Larson were tied for 16th among the NHL's leaders in shots blocked. Toronto defenseman Jake McCabe entered the weekend with a league-best 86 blocked shots. Quote, we're losing a penalty killer and a guy that was counted on, unquote, Sabres coach Lindy Ruff said. We played him in every situation. The Sabres approached the NHL's roster freeze at 11:59 p.m. Friday with a strategy, particularly with Timmins' absence. Quote, we're just evaluating right now what the options are, unquote, Ruff said. We've had 2 extra D here with Jacob Bryson and Zach Metza, but I think we will look at everything, unquote. Kesselring could be the next player to fill Timmins' role in the lineup, particularly on the penalty kill. He played 14:07, including 1:47 on the penalty kill in the third period against the Flyers. Kesselring was on the ice for more than 90 seconds as the Sabres killed off a delay of game penalty against Mattias Samuelsson late in the third period, which turned into a 6-on-4 situation after the Flyers pulled goalie Samuel Ersson for a 6th skater with less than 2 minutes left in regulation and the Flyers trailing 4-3. Less than 15 hours later, Kesselring worked with Bowen Byram, Timmins' defensive partner in the previous 19 games, in practice Friday morning at KeyBank Center. The Sabres entered the weekend with 7 defensemen and rotated their pairings during practice. Samuelsson skated with Owen Power and with a regular defensive partner, Rasmus Dahlin, while Kesselring also skated with Metza. Dahlin also paired with Bryson, who also skated on the fourth line because wing Jordan Greenway did not practice Friday as part of his load management plan in recovering from off-season hernia surgery. Quote, we have a lot of good defensemen, Byram said. When a guy goes down, we have lots of guys that can fill in for him. So it's a luxury that we're lucky to have. Guys will play a bit more, trying to do the best we can to replace him. Our next article in sports, Twins, Bell finalized $7 million one-year deal. First baseman Josh Bell and the Minnesota Twins have finalized their $7 million one-year contract. The sides agreed to terms Monday, pending a physical exam, and the Twins announced the deal Friday. Bell gets a $250,000 signing bonus and a $5.5 million salary in 2026. A person with knowledge of the negotiations told the Associated Press on Monday. The contract includes a mutual option for 2007 with a $1.25 million buyout for Bell, who also gets a hotel suite on road trips. The person spoke to the AP on condition of anonymity because the deal was still subject to successful physical at that stage and had not been announced yet. A durable switch hitter with power, Bell projects to help fill a void at first base and designated hitter for the Twins in his 11th major league season. He hit .237 with 22 home runs and 63 RBIs this year for Washington. The Dallas area native has played in at least 140 games in each of his 8 full big league seasons, topping 600 plate appearances 5 times. Bell was selected in the second round of the 2011 amateur draft out of high school by Pittsburgh and made his major league debut in 2016. His best season came with the Pirates in 2019 when he made the All-Star team while hitting .277 with 37 home runs, 116 RBIs, and a .936 OPS. He has 193 homers and a .785 OPS over his career, almost entirely in the National League. Bell had stints with Miami, Arizona, and San Diego, too. His only prior American League experience came in 2023 with Cleveland. Over the last 5 years, Bell has switched teams 7 times, including 4 trades. The Twins will be a 6th team in less than 4 years. This is the 3rd straight offseason the Twins have used free agency to find a stopgap first baseman, with the 33-year-old Bell following Ty France and Carlos Santana. After France was traded to Toronto on July 31st, one of 9 deals the Twins made that week leading up to the deadline, Cody Clemens took most of the playing time at first base. Clemens, who hit 19 home runs in 112 games while also filling in at second base and every outfield spot, likely will slide into a utility backup role. Next sports feature is soccer. Africa Cup moves to 4-year cycle. The Associated Press. African soccer is getting a major shakeup with the creation of the African Nations League and conversion of the biennial Africa Cup of Nations to a 4-year cycle. Patrice Motsepe, the president of the Confederation of African Football, announced the changes Saturday during his press conference ahead of the 2025 Africa Cup hosted by Morocco. Motsepe said the 2027 Africa Cup, to be hosted by Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, will go ahead as planned, and that the following edition, originally scheduled for 2029, will be moved forward to take place in 2028. The next Africa Cup after that will be in 2032. This would allow the first African Nations League to take place in 2029. Motsepe said it would involve each of the continent's 54 members, divided into 4 geographical zones, with games in September and October before the finals are held in November. Quote, what is new is that in Africa, there's going to be a competition every year where the best African players who play in Europe and worldwide will be with us on the continent, unquote, Motsepe said. CAF officials did not immediately specify if the African Nations League will be held on a biennial or annual basis. Haller ruled out. Sebastian Haller, who led host nation Ivory Coast to the Africa Cup of Nations title in the last edition, has been ruled out of the tournament starting on Sunday because of injury. The Ivorian Federation of Football said on social media on Friday that Haller will miss the event in Morocco because of an injury sustained while playing for Dutch team Utrecht. Haller reportedly injured his hamstring in a match against NAC Breda last Sunday. He was to be placed in the Ivorian squad by Aston Villa player Evan Gousand. Haller missed the start of the 2023 Africa Cup because of an ankle injury, but he returned to score winning goals against Congo in the semifinals and Nigeria in the final as the host team completed a remarkable turnaround after near elimination. Haller became the team's hero 1 year after returning from cancer treatment. Ivory Coast begins its title defense on Wednesday against Mozambique. Host Morocco plays the opening match against Comoros in Rabat on Sunday. Adams tears MCL. United States international Tyler Adams will be out for up to 3 months after tearing a medial collateral ligament. Bournemouth coach Andoni Iraola said on Friday. Adams was injured in the opening minutes of Monday's Premier League draw against Manchester United. Quote, Tyler has torn his MCL, so he will definitely be out for some time, unquote, Iraola said. Quote, from our previous experience with MCL injuries, it is normally around 2 or 3 months. Quote, it's a big blow because he is an important player for us. Straight away, when you see the mechanism of the injury and the action itself, we felt it could be something serious, unquote. Adams' injury is also a potential blow for the U.S. team ahead of next year's World Cup. Adams has had lengthy injury layoffs in recent seasons and underwent back surgery last year, but he has been a near ever-present Bournemouth this term. Czechs hire Kubek. Veteran coach Miroslav Kubek is taking over the Czech national team for the final stage of World Cup qualifying, the country's soccer association said. The 74-year-old Kubek replaces Ivan Hasek, who was fired in October after a humiliating 2-1 loss to Faroe Islands in World Cup qualifying. Hasek's assistant Yaroslav Kostel had served as interim coach in a 1-0 win over San Marino in a friendly and a 6-0 victory against Gibraltar in their final World Cup qualifier. Czech Football Association President David Trunda said Kubek was given a contract for 2.5 years. His immediate and tricky task will be the European qualifying playoffs in March. The Czechs last qualified for the World Cup in 2006. Our next feature in sports is the Bills mailbag. W.R. Hardman's return should ease Shakir's workload on special teams. Welcome to the Sunday Bills mailbag. Let's get right to your questions. Brenda asks, I always thought it was reckless to have Khalil Shakir on punt or kickoff returns. Why risk your most reliable receiver to injury? Over the past few weeks, Ray Davis has been a pleasant surprise on kick returns. Any idea why it took the Bills so long to try Davis in that role? Jay, I'm with you that having Shakir as a punt returner isn't ideal. His time in that job looks like it will be coming to an end, though. Mecole Hardman is eligible to come off injured reserve at any point, and my expectation is that once he does, he'll be inserted as a primary punt returner. As for Davis, he had always been in the rotation as kick returner, but Ty Johnson and Curtis Samuel were ahead of him on the depth chart. With Samuel injured, Davis got more of an opportunity and has run with it, literally. Rick asks, the concentration on defense in the draft is wasting Josh Allen. Might Terry Pegula, now that he might be in the mood, have a sit-down with the general manager and head coach and change the plan? A concentration on wide receivers, other offensive players in the offseason and draft. If the offense has to save the defense, give them the weapons, please. J. You could look at this both ways. The defense, being the deficient side of the ball, still needs help. You could make a case that staying healthier alone would greatly help that side of the ball. It's hard to argue that point. As it stands, the Bills need another pass rusher and a middle linebacker next year. I believe Terrell Bernard will move to weak side linebacker, replacing Matt Milano. The team has to decide what to do with Joey Bosa. He's been good and seems to love playing here, but there is no guarantee he re-signs. If you told me right now that the Bills were going to spend their first 3 draft picks on wide receivers, though, I wouldn't hate the idea. You make a good point, Rick, that if the team is going to need to outscore teams, it should do everything possible to give Josh Allen the weapons necessary to do that. The team also has to re-sign center Connor McGovern and left guard David Edwards. The offensive line has been a strength and needs to be a top priority. After that, it's an obvious need to upgrade at wide receiver. Eric H. asks, my question relates to announcing and reporting, and is probably more of a pet peeve than anything else, and I'd like to get your take. It involves the persistent use of the phrase unanswered points by announcers and reporters. Correct me if I'm wrong, but points scored by one team are only unanswered if the team never scores again. Correct? Why is this a consistently misused phrase? Isn't it just as easy to say the Bills have scored 21 straight or 21 consecutive points? J. You're not wrong, Eric. Once the other team scores, those points stop being unanswered. That's not a phrase I use often in my writing, so I'll assume you're referring to others who are using it incorrectly. It is an easy fix to just say 21 consecutive points, as you mentioned. While we're on the topic, though, I'll give you my 2 pet peeves that I see far too often. The first is the use of the word unique, which means the only one of its kind. Often when people use that word, it's better to swap in the word unusual. The second is describing something as the first annual anything. If it's the first one, it's not annual. The plan for it to become annual, but the world could end tomorrow and then we never made it to the second annual. Luckily, there is a word that takes care of this problem, inaugural. It's a great word. More people should use it. Next feature in sports is Cherish These Times. Bills cornerback Tre'Davious White relishes his second stint in Buffalo. Catherine Fitzgerald. When Tre'Davious White came down with the ball last Sunday against the New England Patriots, picking off quarterback Drake May on third down, White didn't get specific with how long it had been since his last interception. Quote, "No, I ain't do the math," unquote, White said Thursday. Quote, "But you know, it's been a long damn time," unquote. For those keeping track, it was 118 days, 3 team changes, and 2 seasons later. But with White back in Buffalo after a year away, the game and the people here make it mean more to him than ever before. Quote, "I think the biggest thing is he feels like this is the uniform he should be wearing," unquote, defensive coordinator Bobby Babich said. Finding a home. It is no surprise that White feels this way. The veteran cornerback made it clear at his reintroductory press conference in April that Buffalo is the place he very much wanted to be. It came down to the people, and people at every level of the organization. Quote, "When I came back, I looked forward to seeing Mr. Dale making my pancakes, or Miss Mel upstairs making my eggs, or Miss Nadine making my oranges with ice," unquote, White said Friday. It's just like the same routine. His time away and previous injuries had taught him that no matter how much he loved football, football wasn't guaranteed to love him back. But in Buffalo, the 9-year veteran found solace. Quote, "It's just like I'm home. Like, it's just so much love," unquote, White said. Quote, "So I'm still enjoying it. I'm still embracing it. And I'm still taking it one day at a time. Because the stand's getting short. It's getting slim. It's getting like to the end." Quote, "So you just want to cherish these times and embrace it, and just be in the moment and really just enjoy," unquote. The interception last week was a perfect example of celebrating when he can. With fellow cornerback Christian Benford sidelined with a toe injury, White played 100% of the defensive snaps, as opposed to rotating with rookie Maxwell Hairston. In addition to his interception, White allowed just one catch for 18 yards on 4 targets. Quote, "Woo, man, this past week versus New England in particular, he really did a great job of playing at a high level," unquote. Bills coach Sean McDermott said Wednesday. Quote, "As I've said before, very few, if any, players have been more dedicated, more determined," unquote. Since the Bills' bye, White has allowed just 6 catches, including 1 touchdown on 20 targets. He has helped mentor younger players as he still impacts the game. But when members of the Bills coaching staff evaluate his play, it's hard for them not to look at the much bigger picture of the comeback from the ACL tear and the Achilles rupture, of all the work behind the scenes to do so. "Some people don't come back from one of those, let alone 2 of those," McDermott said. And he continues to work. So it's a great example to me for other players out there who may be going through something similar, or young people who go, "All right, the deck is stacked against me. What am I going to do?" And he has continued to work and push and push and push. White's performance and his boundless energy have caught the attention of his teammates. Next in sports is scores and standings. So in football, in the NFL, AFC East, New England leads with 11 wins and 3 losses. Buffalo is second with 10 wins and 4 losses. Miami is third with 6 wins and 8 losses, and the New York Jets are 3-11. In the South AFC, Jacksonville is leading with 10 wins and 4 losses. Houston is second and they're 9-5. Indianapolis has 8 wins and 6 losses, and Tennessee has 2 wins and 12 losses. In the North AFC, Pittsburgh leads with being 8-6. Baltimore is 7-7. Cincinnati is 4-10, and Cleveland is 3-11. In the West, Denver is at first and is 12-2. The LA Chargers are 10-4. Kansas City is 6-8, and Las Vegas is 2-12. Now in the NFC, Philadelphia leads in the East, 9-5. Dallas is 6-7. Washington 4-10. The Giants 2-12. In the South NFC, Tampa Bay is 7-7. Carolina 7-7. Atlanta 5-9. New Orleans 4-10. In the North, Chicago leads with 10 wins and 4 losses. Green Bay is 9-4. Detroit is 8-6, and Minnesota is 6-8. And in the West, Seattle leads with 12-3. LA is 11-4. San Francisco is 10-4, and Arizona is 3-11. Thursday's result: Atlanta wins over Tampa Bay 29-28. Sunday's results: Baltimore is over Cincinnati 24-0. Buffalo was 35-31 over New England. Chicago is 31 over Cleveland, who had 3. Houston is 40 and Arizona 20. Jacksonville 48 and New York Jets 20. Chargers beat Kansas City 16-13. Philadelphia beats Las Vegas 31-0. Washington wins over the Giants 29-21. Denver over Green Bay 34-26. The Rams over Detroit 41-34. And New Orleans over Carolina 2017. San Francisco beats Tennessee 37-24. Seattle 18 over Indianapolis, who had 16. Minnesota 34, Dallas 26. Monday's result is Pittsburgh 28 and Miami 15. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from today's Buffalo News. Sunday, December 21st. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that at noon is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,